Welcome to the Twice Over Movies podcast. If you're new here, check out our website at thetwiceover.com to get a better understanding of how we do our movie reviews. Our goal is to provide insight on elements of a movie which you consider more or less important, so that our scores are never misleading. Remember to follow us at the Twice Over on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and support us on Patreon.
This is the spoiler alert, everyone. We're going to discuss the movie fully.
Let's just go right into it. So, here's what I thought the overarching thing is how you handle people who you don't know, who are foreign to you. And what Guillermo Del Toro wants us to do is love what you don't know. Love what is foreign, embrace it, and protect it. And that's with all of the political undertones in this movie. There's some civil rights stuff, there's some gay rights stuff. And none of it is overpowering, but when it does come, there's a clear stance. Even though these people look different than you, even though they may be different, but there's beauty there. And you need to embrace it, you need to love what you don't know, and you need to protect what you don't know. It's the civil rights stuff, the gay rights stuff, as well as, the what do you want to reference? The asset? The creature?
No, I think asset's more demeaning.
Yeah, the creature
also is kind of demeaning, but like.
What did we say? The merman. The merman.
The merman. The IMDb has it listed as amphibian man.
Okay, the amphibian man is different, completely foreign, and one of the things that Strickland, basically the main villain in the movie, he says, he's talking to Zelda, who's one of the cleaners of this facility, this top secret government scientist facility. Mm-hmm. And he says, you may think that thing looks human, but it stands on two legs, doesn't it? But we're creating the Lord's image. You don't think that's what the Lord looks like, do you? And Zelda's response is, I don't know what the Lord looks like, sir. And he says, he looks human, like me, or even you, maybe a little bit more like me.
Yeah.
So that is, that statement kind of says it all. He's the villain. His reaction or his thought process here says a lot about him, and it says a lot about the kind of thing that Guillermo Del Toro and the other writers of this movie, it's not just him, are trying to kind of speak out against. And her reaction to what he says, she says, I don't know what the Lord looks like, sir. That's that's kind of telling of the way that he wants us to act, and the way that he believes that we should be viewing things.
Yeah, like a humble approach, or
a humble approach. Just because we don't know what somebody looks like, just because we're not familiar with somebody or with a certain thing, doesn't mean it's not beautiful.
Is it in that same exchange that he says the creature is like ugly as sin?
I don't believe so.
He does mention that. I was going to bring that up anyway because of it just signifies his superiority complex, and also with the exchange that you mentioned where he says he looks like me, maybe even you, but a little more like me because he's white, he's a man.
Right.
So he clearly has this superiority complex. He's a misogynist. He's clearly racist. You said that Guillermo del Toro wants us to love the unknown or the other. I think it's more just don't have a superiority complex. Just because it's different doesn't mean you are better. I think that's the bigger point here.
Yeah, you can go either way. I think it's probably both of them. It's not. I don't think it's one or the other.
It is. Yeah, it's both of them.
Yeah. So yeah, I think he did it well enough. I think he did it really well that it wasn't. Nothing was overpowering, and it's again. Themes are always going to be cliche. It's always going to be. So, it is kind of cliche, but that's fine. It's the theme category. That's the whole category. So, yeah, was that my highest score? That was my highest score. Was the themes of this movie. I thought it was going to be the narrative. When I first watched this movie, I watched it in theaters when it came out. Mm-hmm. And I was such a big fan of Pan's Labyrinth that when I saw the previews for this, the year before or something, in another movie, I was like, I can't wait till this movie is going to come out. I'm going to see it the first day it comes out. And I did. And I think that I was so fanboyed out by Del Toro that I left with this inflated view of the movie. When I watched it again recently, I just didn't think it was as good as when I had first seen it. I don't know if you had that same experience.
Well, I only watched it once, which was a day ago.
Right,
So
that's true. Yeah.
I did like the movie. It was better than I actually thought it was going to be because, again, for whatever reason, I mean, again, I mentioned I'm not into fantasy movies, but for whatever reason, the premise of this movie or what I read or heard about it before, like it just didn't entice me enough to want to go watch it. Um, so coming out yesterday after watching it, I was like, oh, this is actually better than I thought it would be. But I did, like, I wrote this down. I mean, there's a lot of parallels to Pan's Labyrinth here, but clearly for me, Pan's Labyrinth is like the better movie, the more enjoyable movie.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel the same way?
That's a good question because as soon as we finished this movie, right, like because I watched it 2 days ago, and I asked my wife the same thing, and I think she liked Pan's Labyrinth better. I don't know. I'm kind of between the two. I love certain scenes in this movie. And I'm just so attached to those scenes. Yeah, I guess we can go into those. I mean, one scene that really, really sticks out to me. And it's not like, it's not as many as I thought there were going to be. But scene that really sticks out to me is when she's telling Giles to sign what she's saying. You remember that scene, of course?
Yeah.
Yeah, her performance when she does that is kind of one of my favorite acting performances of anything. Because there are so many things at play here. First,
this
like
is when she's trying to convince him to
help her, to help her extract. I don't know, what would you say? To help her get the thing to
help the creature escape.
Yeah, I guess so. The creature didn't really do anything, so he didn't really escape. But whatever it was. So here we could talk about the first thing that of this scene. They didn't subtitle this part, and this is all signed.
Yeah, only when he talked I mean, that's what you heard.
And they did that for, they did that for good reason. I didn't pick up on that the first time that I watched it. Usually throughout the movie, whenever she is saying anything, she's saying it through sign language. And there is a subtitle for her sign. Up to this point, everything has been signed. And even when she's telling him, she tells him, repeat back what I say. That is subtitled. And he says, okay. When she starts her main message, there's no longer any subtitles. And so here's what they did. If they had put subtitles there, the audience would be way too focused reading the subtitles rather than watching her act her butt out. Because what the audience does see when they do see her acting out her signs, they see how, like, you see how a mute girl expresses love, concern, urgency, all at the same time. Even down to like the sounds that come from her mouth whenever she is like really, really passionate about it, and she's trying to just get him to keep his attention. Even just the sounds that come from her mouth. I mean, her facial expressions. You can just tell like she's desperate to keep this being that she has like fallen for. She's trying to keep him alive because of how he looks at her with such adoration, and she's kind of you see her recalling that. You see her, like, you're seeing her search for words. She's not just, it's not a script. She's searching for the right words to make, And so it's such an interesting scene.
And she's responding to how Giles is like repeating it back. So like the frustration that builds up when he's just like, I gotta go.
And you see it. Yeah. You see it in that piece of dialogue. I'm gonna call it more than anything that she's kind of been like incomplete her whole life. She even says that. And everybody looks at her as having a deficiency. Everybody must have just been like, oh, she's mute. Oh, and they treat her differently. The creature, well, I shouldn't say that. The amphibian man looks at her like she can never be anything but perfect, And she's so natural with her sign. Or at least it seems, I don't know anything about sign language, but it seems like she's doing it so naturally that she's very fluent in that, even though the actress herself can and does speak. I don't know if she has any. I'm interested to see if the actress does have any sign experience, because she did such an extraordinary job.
Yeah, I have no idea. I did see like something about how she studied a lot of like Chaplin.
So that's another thing I was gonna.
Some silent film actors to like prepare for the role, but I'm not sure anything about the actual signing I mean, I'm sure she probably learned it. I don't know what her experience was
Interesting.
beforehand, though.
You said that she. See, I never read up on a movie, so she studied Chaplin a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, well, for this role specifically.
Her reactions throughout the movie, outside of outside of that part, her reactions to like when Giles is talking to her about the guy that he likes at the shop, or about the movies, like when Shirley Temple, he's talking about her and how good she did. Her reactions were very, very, very similar to Chaplin. So that makes perfect sense. She does a really, really good job. That's why, I mean, her acting is just incredible. And if she was not in this movie, I would have watched it still, but I would not have liked it. I would not have chosen it to speak about.
Yeah, she definitely makes it.
Yeah, and another favorite scene of mine, and I mean, this is probably kind of typical of me, but as soon as they do make love, her and that in the Amphibian Man, when she's in the bus and there's that French music playing, I'm just a sucker for French music, I guess. French female voice, like French female vocals. That's playing, and she's tracing the water on the bus window.
Oh yeah, that was a good scene.
I loved that scene. It's so beautiful. It's such
It is, yeah. It's a great transition too.
It's a great transition, and so her sense of like curiosity and her sense of wonder, the way that she falls. I mean, she's so charming. Even the way that she looks at the Amphibian Man with such like adoration. There's even you might even be like a little lustful. Like those scenes when they're falling for each other, those are some of my favorite scenes as well. Outside of those, there weren't a lot of scenes that I really loved, but I loved those scenes so much.
I really liked the beginning when we first watch her go to work, like her midnight shift where it's like dark out and you have like the neon lights or just the city lights in general. I thought the camera movement there was really good. I mean, I assume it was like a tracking shot.
Yeah, it was mostly stationary from what I remember.
Well, that's what I'm saying, not this first scene where you see her leaving her apartment, getting on the bus, and then you just get the city in the back. Otherwise, I mean, I gave the aesthetics a 90, but I didn't have like specific scenes that I thought were super beautiful. I mean, there are a couple, the very end when they're in the water, like, which is I think like the poster for the movie as well, like the cover shot. I thought that was amazing. I thought the scene in their bathroom when she fills it up with water was pretty awesome too. I mean, there's a lot of small, like, I just like the entire feel of the movie that it gave me through the aesthetics.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the aesthetics here a little bit. I mean, yeah, there are those scenes that we talked about, and I think that those are, again, you know how we've talked about this before. Sometimes there's these images that the director or, you know, the cinematographer has in their minds, and they're like, I want to put that in this movie, and I'm going to find a way, even if it doesn't make sense. So I think that that's kind of, I mean, those are a couple of those scenes with she fills the bathroom up with water. That makes no realistic sense. That floor would have collapsed.
Obviously, but the movie's a fantasy.
That floor would have completely collapsed. But it's a good scene, right? It looks nice.
Why do you draw the line there, though? Who cares?
No, I don't. I don't. That's what I'm saying. I don't. And that's not... I love those scenes. And I think that the tone that they're going for is really good. I mean, what I got in my notes is that there's some dull tones with some bright colors, notably red. There's kind of some orange in there, but there's a lot of like neon stuff, you know? So I think it was an interesting color scheme. Like everything has its own color scheme. Her apartment.
Yeah, Giles' apartment has like that very orangey, popish color.
Yeah, it's like sort of brown, you know?
And then her workplace is like the gray, green. It's like nasty. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's I think they did a really good. He spends a lot of time and he spends a lot of money on set design and set stuff. You know, even if you look at Pan's Labyrinth, I mean, it's kind of the same. It's not as much, I would say, as this. This is probably a little bit more on the production scale than Pan's Labyrinth is, but. You know, I think they did some of that stuff really well. Yeah.
Speaking about Pan's Labyrinth again, I was going to mention this. I mean, the ending reminded me very much of Pan's Labyrinth. When she gets shot on the dock and she's laying down, it's so eerily similar to when the girl in Pan's Labyrinth gets shot, and like her blood drips down to like the other world. And like same with this, right, where she is resurrected or alive again in the water now, with her scars becoming gills, and she's, I guess, an amphibian woman at this point. But yeah, it had very similar endings. That's why, I mean, that was the first thing I thought about Pan's Labyrinth. But I wanted to mention something else too. So there's a lot of religious, like,
connotations or references.
when we first see the theater in her building that she lives above of is playing a biblical movie from the 50s or 60s. I'm not sure what the movie was. And then with Strickland, he mentions God a lot. He mentions the Bible a lot. He mentions Delilah and Samson's story in the Bible because Zelda's middle name is Delilah. And he even says, like you mentioned earlier, the whole image of God. And then at the very end, when the amphibian man kills Strickland, he actually looks at him and says, "You are God," and he gets killed. And I don't know, I just found that pretty, like, interesting. I was thinking about it, not that I have any answers about anything that I understand what he was or what Guillermo Del Toro wanted us to get from it. But I just thought it was interesting, like how much he did mention, I guess, religion or God in general.
Interesting. So think about this. The other time he does mention God outright is when he is talking to Zelda. And we talked about this already when he said, "The Lord looks like me," right? He doesn't look like that guy. He doesn't look like that creature. The Lord looks like me. And the Lord is supposed to be like, what we're trying to achieve, what we're working towards, what is good. And everything else is, what the Lord isn't is not what we should pay attention to. We should pay attention to what the Lord looks like, which is a white man. And then at the end when he says, "Oh, you are God," right? So that's kind of bringing the story sort of full circle. I mean, I wasn't a big fan of it, but that's kind of the idea there.
Like a realization?
Right. It's like a realization. Like, oh, you know what? You are God, meaning you are something that should be cherished, and you are beautiful, and you are something that you're not, you're not evil, basically. But that's what I got from that, pretty much.
I'm not sure who's doing the narration in this movie. It starts with a narration and it ends with a narration. I wasn't sure if it was Giles or...
That's what it sounded like.
I assumed it was him, but I don't think it's, like, clear.
It sounded like him, and we can go back to the other point a little bit, but while we're on the narration, I thought it was completely useless. That beginning piece of narration... He talks of he's like, well, where do I tell the story? Maybe I could talk about a city near the coast that's far from everything. Baltimore is close to a lot of stuff. I don't know what the hell they're talking about.
Yeah, Baltimore is...
And then they're talking about
part of the Northeast with Philly, Washington, D.C.
It's close to a lot of stuff. Philly's not far. D.C.'s not far. There's stuff to do everywhere. Even in the 60s, D.C., it was
if
not
anything,
like...
Baltimore was a bigger city back then than it is now.
It was a bigger city. So, I think that they just wrote stuff and didn't really put thought into it. They talk about the reign of a princess.
Yeah,
really delved into.
I thought that narration in the beginning, I did also feel it was pretty useless, but I think it was just there to create this, like, like a fairy tale type feel to the movie, because that's how, like, a fairy tale starts, right, with that type of narration.
Yeah, but I wish that it was more something more substantial.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree. It didn't really add much to the movie. I agree with that. But the very end, that quote, I mean, the first thing I did after they mentioned that poem, I'm like, that's got to be Rumi, right? Like, that has to be.
Yeah.
I looked it up. It's not. Well, they don't, like, Guillermo Del Toro just said, yeah, he got inspired from some Islamic poetry. That's how he came up with it. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, it's probably Rumi or someone, like one of his teachers or something, because clearly it sounded like he's talking about God.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it sounded like. I mean, yeah, you're right to go to clue in on the religious stuff. I don't think it's not in your face. I think if there's a lot of stuff in this movie that if you really want to delve into, you probably can, and I didn't. Like the film stuff, she lives right above a theater. Yeah. There's a movie playing. I don't know what movie it was. There were some titles on the thing. I don't remember what
Mardi
they were.
Gras and something.
I'm sure there's something.
Yeah, and then the shows and movies that they're watching at Giles's apartment too, right?
Right. I'm sure there's references to all kinds of stuff.
Well, the Giles
like
apartment,
like
the dancing. I just thought, like, hey, that's a nice way for the main character, Eliza, to, I don't know, see silent movies or see the dancing and seeing how she can communicate through music. Because she also likes music a lot, right? She plays music for the amphibian man when she goes to work. It's like another way for her to communicate, I guess. That's. I mean, I didn't think too much into it, but that's what I picked up from it.
Yeah, I think it's Yeah, I mean, it's all really clever. If you want to look for that stuff and you're somebody who does look for Easter eggs and stuff, this is probably an amazing movie to do that kind of stuff, because I know that there's a bunch of references.
Yeah, especially for the movie stuff. I'm sure it's probably references for like Guillermo Del Toro himself, like in terms of homages that he's paying towards, like, you know, his heroes.
Right. All kinds of stuff. His heroes. Even like there's a lot of stuff with like the French film scene, like old French film scene. You know, it's just kind of similar to even like Amelie sort of does the same thing. Her character is eerily similar to Amelie.
Yeah.
If you're somebody who looks for that stuff, you know, this is probably a great movie. I personally don't. And I know it's there, but I just kind of look for whatever the stuff that I do know. I don't think it's worth my time to sit there and look for Easter eggs.
I mean, I find it fun to look it up after. I mean, I probably wouldn't pick up on most of the stuff on like a normal watch anyway. You're too busy just paying attention to the movie. You know, we talked about Strickland. He had some like funny moments, or I guess weird moments that kind of tell you what kind of person he is. He had that one spiel about washing your hands either before or after using the bathroom. You don't do it twice.
Yeah.
When he is talking to Dmitri, Dr. Hofstetler, when he's basically, you know, letting him die, he wants to get information out of him. He talks about candy and how he's a simple man and just likes his basic candy. He lets it sit for a while unless he's anxious, and he bites into it. I'm like, those are some good lines. I like the writing in those sections.
Yeah, I kind of disagree. I think that they didn't spend enough time building this character up.
The villain?
Because you know, like if you compared to Pan's Labyrinth, the villain in that was amazing. I loved that villain.
Mm-hmm.
This dude, he's so prototypical. There's not really much depth to his character other than the fact that he wants to achieve. And that's all we know about this guy. And everything else is so blah about him. And that's fine if that's what the character is, but they just didn't put much time into actually developing him.
Yeah, I mean,
they put little things like, you know, even that scene where you're talking about where he's kind of interrogating Dr. Hofstetler. Mm-hmm. It's not a natural transition to when he does talk about the candy. It comes out of nowhere. It's not natural at all.
I don't think it'll come out of nowhere, because we see him eating the candy earlier in the movie too.
Yeah, I know, but I think that because at that point he's sort of in a rush to find who did it, because he's racing against time. Mm-hmm. And he's sitting there, and then he's like, he finds that time to sit there and talk about his candy thing, and he's just taking his time. And just, you know, it's not at all natural. I didn't believe it. It didn't seem to me.
I do agree with you that his character in general lacked some depth. He was just a prototypical villain. He played the role well, though, I thought. But yeah, it's a little shallow for sure. That's why those little moments that we did have of him just giving a little insight into who he was, I found that interesting.
Again, he's not meant to be the main focus of the movie, but I think the way that they treated his character is the way they treated a lot of the movie, which was what ultimately became a huge turnoff for me the second time that I watched it. Like, I can go on for probably go on for 20 minutes of little details that made zero sense, that in a movie like this really just shouldn't be happening. They've been making this movie for a long time.
Give me one example.
Okay, I'll just start listing things off and you tell me when to stop.
Okay.
When they're in that thing, they're cleaning that big, huge space thing.
Yeah.
How are they two alone cleaning this one huge space thing? There's nothing when Zelda is cleaning it, there's nothing there. She's dusting an underside of something. When you're cleaning a fan, are you spending 20 minutes cleaning the underside of the fan or on top of the fan?
I see that as like, all right, they're trying to show us like where they work. It's setting the place.
I understand. I understand, but there's no cleaning cart next to them. They just included the scene because of the visual appeal.
I'm wondering
of them two being small and how big that thing is. You know,
I was gonna wonder if you're gonna say anything about eggs. What does eggs have to do with?
So the eggs is a kind of, there's a sexual connotation there, and there's a lot of sexual imagery throughout the whole movie.
Because
so that's a little different.
She's like masturbating to like the timer while cooking those eggs.
The egg-shaped timer. Egg is kind of like, you know, I mean. It's like sort of symbolizes women's sexuality. It's one of the symbols of women's sexuality. So
really, I actually don't
that's
know
where the
that.
eggs is. Yeah, if you think about eggs, like
I think of eggs. Okay,
eggs,
you think about
there's
fertilization,
ovaries,
I guess.
Fertilization, but also, yeah, I mean,
I don't know how sexy
there's
that
something
is.
there.
That's kind of like, it's a little like anatomy there.
It is. Even if you watch the way that she interacts with the egg when she gives it to
Yeah,
him
very
the first
gentle and
time,
all that.
she's kind of like
Caressing it.
seductively eating it, you know. So that's just more about the sexual imagery, and there's a lot of that. There really is a lot of that stuff in this movie.
You know, the dude that played the amphibian man is the same one from Pan's Labyrinth. Like he plays a creature in like every Guillermo Del Toro movie.
Really?
His name is
See,
Doug Jones.
he's got similar movements as the fawn.
Yeah,
from
the
Pan's
fawn,
Labyrinth.
Exactly. Let me see if I can pull it up. 'Cause I was looking him up. I'm like, man, this dude, that's all he does is these characters. From Indianapolis. Yeah, he plays the Pale Man and the Fawn in Pan's Labyrinth.
Oh, really?
And yeah, he's in Hellboy as well.
Is he the fawn? He plays the fawn as well, the same person?
Yep, Fawn and the Pale Man. The Pale Man is the guy with the eyes in his hands, right?
Right. Yeah.
So he plays both of them, and he plays the amphibian man here.
Interesting. So that's just one example. I mean, there's so many, dude. The head of security knows Zelda by name. When we first see the creature, she's like yelling at the dude about so freely, like in the presence of scientists. That's not like, doesn't matter. That's not a big deal. Like how, and then when he brings them to interview 3 times, who interviews cleaners? Why is he meeting with them all the time? He's asking them very personal questions, and it makes no sense. Why would he ever do that? You know what I mean? She brings a record player into that lab. How did she hide the record player?
Yeah,
There's
the record player one I actually thought
kinds
about. I'm
of
like,
stuff.
did she really bring a record player to work? Come on.
Yeah. And then when that dude asked them to clean up, the head of security, Fleming, he comes to ask them to clean up. They're about to have dinner. Why them too? Like, there's so many. This place is full of cleaning people who are all also having dinner. And he brings just them two. Like, it doesn't make any sense. But the emotional impact is greater with them doing it, obviously,
Yeah,
right? The story has to follow them.
It makes sense to use them. That's why I don't have a big problem with it.
Yeah, it's not realistic. But again, and that's stuff that I really, really look for. I want things to be realistic. I don't want to see the process. When I'm just watching a movie, I don't want to be able to see that they did away with certain details in order to make something happen. And that's this whole movie. All throughout the movie, we see that. So.
I agree with you, but I mean, I'm just gonna say it's probably it's a time constraint. You got to get the story going, or else it'll take forever.
It's not a terribly long movie. It's 2 hours.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Imagine
if they stretch it to 2.5. I think they could have done a better job.
If they made
I
it
think
2.5
hours.
Do you really think? Like, I mean, I thought it was a slow. Oh yeah, let's talk about this because I said it was a little slow burn, and you seemed kind of surprised at that. Like,
Yeah,
I thought it was. So?
I thought it was. No, I thought it was. It moved really fast. I thought it moved quick. Like that's why I didn't think it was as good as I thought it was originally. They didn't put enough time. I thought it moved too quick.
There's one scene that's obviously very tense when they're kidnapping or helping. Oh yeah, we don't know what to say because he's not really escaping, but they're taking the amphibian man out of the government lab, and
right.
Like that specific scene I thought was very well done. Like, it really creates like a very tense situation, and it works out pretty well. Otherwise though, I can't think of another moment where I mean, it's not that I felt that it was slow, but it is a slow movie. Like, if you're ready for it to move slowly, like, it's fine. Because not much is happening otherwise until that moment, right? Until they're trying to help him escape. Or even at the end, when Strickland is closing down on them, then I guess it gets a little, like, the fast pace at that moment.
I guess compared to, the movies that we usually watch, especially for this podcast, but for the movies that I really like, the scenes are longer. That's kind of the thing. These scenes are really short.
Yeah,
really, really
there's
short.
more edits here.
Even when I'm, before we do these podcasts, I always watch the movie another time just to focus on details, just to take notes and other little things. And when I'm forwarding through a movie, like when we did First Reformed, and I'm forwarding through, I'm not skipping any scenes just by going, 5 minutes. When I went 5 minutes in this movie, I skipped a whole scene. Like,
yeah,
the scenes were really short, and that's what I mean. They didn't take the time to really develop meaningful scenes. There's a couple in there, but I think they could have probably done a lot better. They could have done a lot more. But I think, again, that probably comes to preference. If you don't have a great attention span, well, not even that. I'm gonna say, I look for a lot of depth in a scene. I like slow scenes, so I didn't feel that way. I guess other people probably might feel the opposite. So
I see what you're saying. So the difference is, like, you're saying the scenes are nice and short, not nice in your opinion, but they're short. Therefore, it doesn't feel like a slow movie to you. For me, it's like, yeah, the scenes, there are a lot of edits. There's a lot of cuts, which means, like, the scenes themselves are short, but like, the narrative, the story from one scene to the next, like, doesn't necessarily move. That's what I mean by slow, I guess.
That's true. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, and on second thought, man, I would definitely watch Pan's Labyrinth over this movie. It's definitely the better one.
Yeah, dude, when you mentioned the villain, I was like, oh yeah, of course, like, that freaking military commander or whatever.
How good was that?
He was scary as hell.
Yeah, and that was a revolutionary movie. When that movie came out, there was no other movie like it. When this movie came out, it's so close to a lot of other movies. It borrows really heavily. So the originality isn't there as much as as Pan's Labyrinth was. Mm-hmm. And Pan's Labyrinth is a lot more palatable. It's a lot easier to deal with because it kind of makes you uncomfortable.
Yeah.
She has sex with a mermaid. So and there's a lot of nudity in this movie. So it's just a lot more palatable. It's a lot more universal themes and stuff like that. It's a little bit more broad reaching in terms of audience, and I think it's just probably a better executed movie. That being said, I haven't seen the movie in a long time, and I might find the same thing with details. Speaking of the ending, though, so Guillermo Del Toro does. I would call it his signature, at least from Pan's Labyrinth and this movie, the two best movies that he's made, is that the ending is kind of ambiguous, and he does such a good job with these ambiguous endings. We kind of talked about it in First Reformed a little bit. I don't think they did as good of a job. He makes it so that it's literally 50-50. It can go either way, whether the main character dies or whether they're alive. You don't exactly know in this movie, because when she does sprout those gills and she is alive, we don't know if that's real. We don't know if that's fantasy. She could have died. Same thing with Pan's Labyrinth. When that girl, we don't know if what she's imagining if that's real or if that's imagination, because she has a vivid imagination. And in fact, we don't know if the whole movie in Pan's Labyrinth, what I like is that he plays with imagination the entire movie. We don't know what's real and what she's imagining.
Yeah. Here, there's no question that there was a creature or an amphibian man or something. Like, there's no denying that this existed at all. It's just, whether at the end she comes back to life and is an amphibian woman or not, that's, I guess, up in the air. But yeah, in Pan's Labyrinth, you could go back theoretically and be like, was any of it real at all, or was she just escaping the world to avoid the harsh realities?
Yeah. So that's what he does play with. You mentioned harsh reality, and it's a really good word. He portrays an especially harsh reality. He displays kind of like humans at their worst. Mm-hmm. And he softens it a little bit with what would you call it? Fantasy. So with fairy tale stuff. So that's his signature. I think that's one of the reasons I think you should watch this movie. If you're looking for a female character who does a freaking amazing acting job for the most part, who's very captivating, very charismatic, mm-hmm. Who really grabs your attention, tugs at your heartstrings in moments, this is a great movie to watch. Otherwise, you could probably move on, in my opinion.
Yeah, honestly, I can't even say, even though the story, or just the story of it, right? Like falling in love, the outsider, all that stuff we talked about. Even though that's kind of relatively simple and universal, it's still kind of hard to recommend because, like you said, you have moments that just will make you very uncomfortable and just might be a little too much for some people. So it's hard to recommend easily.
It's like Beauty and the Beast, though. You know what I mean? This is adult Beauty and the Beast. This is Beauty and the Beast, but with reality, right?
But like Guillermo Del Toro is a little more real about it because the creature doesn't become human to like love it.
Yeah, and so actually it's the opposite, right? She becomes
Yeah,
she
true. It's the
becomes
opposite.
creature. She becomes fish. It's an interesting take on it. That's one of the main parallels that I forgot to write down. But yeah, that's a clear thing. I mean, this is literally an adult fairy tale. This is Beauty and the Beast. So if that makes you uncomfortable, if watching Disney Beauty and the Beast but with adult themes and in real life with more sexual tones is uncomfortable for you, then this is probably not a good movie for you. If you're interested in it, by all means, go ahead and watch it. It's not too long. It's 2 hours, and I don't think it drags. But yeah,
I wouldn't say it drags, yeah, but just be ready that it doesn't move that fast either. Generally speaking, I would probably recommend it because it is a good movie. But if you haven't seen Pan's Labyrinth, watch that first.
Yeah, that's what I would say. The 2 scenes in this movie, like I said, I think it's worth it just for those scenes. And you have to know the movie to see the full frame, full context of it. And I think it's worth it just for those scenes. But definitely Pan's Labyrinth first.
Are we good, Faaraan?
I think we're good.
I just reviewed my notes. I have nothing else.
Thanks for listening to this production of The Twice Over. If you haven't already, subscribe and follow wherever you get your podcast. And remember to support us on Patreon or by sharing the podcast with a friend. Feel free to contact us on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook at The Twice Over, or email us at comments@thetwiceover.com. All of the music you heard is from Amerigo Gazaway. Check him out on Bandcamp and Spotify.